Alrighty, live. How's it going, everyone? Cool. Let's close this. All right. So I actually haven't looked at this since yesterday. So I'm getting some fresh eyes on it. Basically, what we did yesterday was develop this chunk of UI from this spec over here. So we have all these details about what needs to be placed in what way and kind of how big it needs to be, et cetera, and where things fall in different orientations. Now, while I got most of the pieces covered, I know that I haven't really focused yet on this right here, the page title only. So that's something that I am going to be experimenting with today to try to find out kind of how this looks in that orientation. One thing that I absolutely failed on last time was getting this gap correct. So let's see if I can pop this open again. So if you watched last time, you kind of saw that I struggled with this a little bit, and I don't know if I really even cared to fix it today. But the problem is this: this is applying a little bit of margin on top, which is important when it's displayed only by itself. And then this one has some margin around it as well, also important when it's displaying just itself. I had thought that I could collapse those margins because margins are supposed to collapse. Unfortunately, I opted out of that by using Flexbox to kind of orient these in relationship to each other. And when I don't use Flexbox, this margin doesn't actually push up the size of this kind of bounding box. So I have like a gray background with like this 32 or 24 pixels of white margin at the top. So I'm inclined to think that depending on the kind of margin behavior is probably a bad idea, especially since I don't want to be prescriptive about how people implement these layouts. If they want to do the Flexbox thing, that's fine. If they don't, also fine. So kind of paring that down so that so that I'm not prescriptive about which way you have to use it would be a nice thing. Let's see. Cool. Hey, what's up, Adam? Good to see you again. Okay, so what are we gonna do here? So the main thing that I want to do is this is all kind of in one file now, and I really wanted to focus on modularizing it. So that's going to be my focus today, kind of thinking about how it is that we modularize this code. Additionally, I wanted to put all of the sample usages on a page. So it kind of do similarly to what this document is showing. So have this orientation, and then this third orientation, which we haven't done yet. I think the only difference is that this container is going to need to, where we top align these buttons, here, these are going to be center aligned. So anyway, I figure I'll modularize everything. I'll kind of get those examples in place, and then we'll be good to go. So how are we going to do this? What we need to do is open up our files here. Oops. And what I do at this phase is, I mean, again, you've kind of noticed, like I do a lot of like rough sketching. I don't think a whole lot about the final implementation. I just kind of like move things around until it like starts to feel right for me. Man, that's the second time I've done that. New file. So we're gonna call this whatever, tabbed header. Yeah, JS. We'll just start with that. Okay, cool. So what I have here is, let's look at what components we have. So we have tab, 8-pixel, tab spacer, container, tab notification, bubble, and then this is just the app. Okay, cool. What I like to do, so let's start with what we want. So we're going to import, let's see, let's import these individually. So relatively from tabbed header, and I'm going to import tab. So I have this defined here. So that's going to give us an error, which is, we totally expect that. So it's saying duplicate definitions, but as soon as I delete this, it's going to break because there's no definitions. Whoa. So save that. Okay, there's no component with that name. Okay, now what I need to do is I need to export this. And I need to import React. So even though, this is one thing that's always kind of funny about React, is that even though I'm not explicitly using React right now, these JSX things, once compiled, compiled to React or create element like that. So even though I don't see the word React anywhere, and this always trips me up, I still need to import it. Okay, cool. So we have our tab. I have successfully moved it from one place to the other. So I pulled that out of there. Let's do the same thing here. Again, I like to start with the thing that I want and then just kind of fix all of the errors as I go along. So 8-pixel flex tab spacer thingy. And we gave that an intentionally verbose name so that in this phase, we would consider a better name for it. Just paste that in and then export. Now, I really like these named exports where in this one module, I am exporting individually these components. Now, part of the reason is that it gives you a lot of flexibility on the implementing side to change things as you need, or to kind of import things differently. So, for example, I can. So let's see. So I'm doing this right now, but if I want, I can collect all of these. Okay, so this is I'm gonna import the module directly, and it's saying we don't have tabs, so that's fine. Wait, what did I call it? Tab header. So tabs. Oh, this could be kind of a pain in the butt because there's so many of them. And I don't know how to do like a multi-cursor select in Code Sandbox. But so then I could do tabbed. Can I do that? Maybe not. So, okay, I'm gonna come back to that. Sorry, false start. I'm still getting my head around what we're doing. I'm gonna finish this task. I got a little sidetracked, kind of sidetracked myself. So let's finish this task. Again, we're gonna do this kind of manual process where I import what I want to have, what I expect to have at the end of this process. Oops. Come on. Delete that. Get our error. Export that named. I think this is our last holdout here. Tabbed notification bubble. Oh, whoa. Copy and paste the wrong thing. Okay, we got container. Undo. I'm sure that smarter people have macros for all of this kind of stuff. I don't. Okay. Okay, so an export tab. Tab notification bubble is not defined. Tab notification bubble. Okay, cool. So now we've kind of successfully peeled this out into its own module. We can start thinking about the names names a little bit more. One thing I like about modularizing this way is that I can very easily have private components. So now this is not exposed anymore. This is great because I can keep all of these components with a high level of cohesion, things designed to work together inside one module, but I don't have to export everything. So I only have to export the things that I plan to support long-term or document or whatever. Everything else can still have that nice kind of isolation of a component, but it doesn't have to be exported. I don't have to kind of support someone using it, which is great for when I'm not totally sure about the implementation long term. If I feel like there's going to be a lot of churn around this component, or I don't necessarily want people to be using it yet. This is a great way to hide that code, but still have it neatly abstracted so that I can make changes to it directly. So obviously I need that exported, so export that again. Okay, cool. So we have that. Now I need to start making these kind of alternate examples. And I think I might, now that I have that code out into its own component, I think I'm going to kind of make a component for each permutation of these. So let's look at what we have here. Oh, I grabbed the handle for something else. Man, oh man. I have like my other screen is like right to the left, and so it just keeps jacking up my selections. Okay, cool. So I'm just gonna go with the names that we've been given. Why reinvent the wheel? So we're gonna call this tabs navigation, and okay, that's not the one that we have now. Okay, and then we will create a new box. Okay, cool. So we're rendering that out, even though there's nothing at this point to care about. Let's make another one. So this one's tab navigation with page title or other input. So tab navigation. All right, and then let's render that out. Cool, cool, cool. And the last of these is page title only. All right, excellent. So now I can pull this. Come on. Pull that out and put that. Which one was that? Tabbed navigation with page title. Okay, so now that is in the center as we suspected. Perfect. And let's see. Let's add some space space to these. Actually, I'd like to put a title in here too, so it kind of actually looks like what we have over here. Each one. What was the other text or other inputs? Page title only for use with collared title bar. Collared title bar. I'm going to be honest, I don't actually know what that means. So we'll find out eventually. All right, cool. So we have that set up. And kind of where this is valuable is eventually when I put this into our repository for these types of components, this would act as my example page. Maybe we put it in Storybook, or maybe we just have like an index. I mean, this is a really small set of components, but I would have this to kind of mirror what was decided, to be able to demonstrate all of the examples, to show the code in all the ways that it's intended to be used. So this, all that's in here is going to kind of act as our example stuff. Okay, so now that we have that in place, it's looking fine enough. I'd like to flesh out these examples with the components that we already have. And then we'll kind of like try to identify some patterns, see what the names of these things should be. Or try to determine like kind of what names have already been placed and go with those. So tabbed navigation. So I'm going to be able to work with these components a little bit more right now. So I'm going to use the container that we have. Already I don't love the name container. It doesn't feel particularly descriptive. I'd like to give it a little bit more oomph. And let's see, what are we doing? We're doing the... Okay, so I'm noticing right now that the way I have this implemented is I just kind of have this magic div. So that's going to need to be extracted into a component as well, because this is doing the heavy lifting of kind of applying that margin to both sides. What's container doing? Okay, so it's doing the... Oh, actually, we don't need container. See, if I had a better name, I would have known. I didn't need that. Okay, cool. So I'm definitely going to need to abstract this out because this same implementation is being used in both places. Not ideal. Oh, it looks like containers doing that background. See, bad naming, man. Bad naming. Okay, so let's undo that. See, this is why like it's super important to like actually play with your work, because like what sounds smart in the moment when you're developing, like when you start actually implementing it, you're like, what the hell does this thing do? Okay, cool. So we have oh, whoops, that's actually the wrong spot for that. It's gonna be this guy. Or this gal. Maybe it's a gal component. Okay, cool. So that's looking good. I'd like to actually, while we're at it, while we're in this one, I'm going to actually add some of those buttons. I'll just copy what we have here. So I'm copying that that margin, which kind of applies that little space, flexible spacer in the middle, and then the two buttons that we have. And again, these aren't the final implementation of these buttons. I know from our applications that we already have CSS styling for these buttons. So I just kind of have some placeholders to have the right size, so I know that they're automatically getting put in the right vertical space. Okay, so I might need to go run an errand real quick. Okay, so and turn off notifications. Heaven knows what you'll see otherwise. Okay, I'm gonna go hide that skateboard. I'll be right back. All right, I'm back. Sorry for the interruption. Okay, cool. So where were we? I wanted to add these buttons to the page title only. Now, looks like I put them in the vertical container, and that is not where they belong. Cool, perfect. Now the question is that how they're supposed to be aligned? Okay, so this says we need 24, 24, 24 all the way around. Oh, it's also telling me the stats on the sizing of this, so that's important. Text align center. So these all should be centered. Let's see. Let's visualize what's going on here. Okay, so we have our container with the 24 pixels on each side. 24, let's see, is that right? Yeah, 24 top and bottom. But this isn't centered. But it looks like those ones are. So again, so we got 24 pixels on top and bottom. This text is not centered on these buttons, which appear to be. Oh. Man, this is always so hard to find my place again after saving. Maybe I should just not save and rely on that autosave feature. Oh, I'm using the wrong align items. There we go. Display flex. I need to take that padding back out. Okay, so that example looks correct now. I am going to add, since I got it right here, add this style, the 22 pixels. I'm not super sure about the white. I mean, I guess I'll do it because that's what it says. All right. And then I'm going to paste that in the other place that we're using this title. So I can duplicate it, see that I've duplicated it, and know what it needs to do. Okay, cool. This example up here isn't supposed to be using it, so I won't copy it there. All right, cool. Everything's coming along. Now we need to do the tabbed navigation only. And that is going to look, let's see, do they have the buttons? Yeah, so they have the secondary and primary button there too. So that's going to look like this section. I'll have to add that container again. Oops. Okay, cool. So we have tab navigation. It's only these tabs. With the buttons, we have tabs with the page title. I have a note kind of saying that we need to fix this little gap here still. And then finally, the page title with just the buttons, and everything is aligned center here, as opposed to being top aligned in these ones. Cool. Let me look for any other glaring oversights. This number, at least in this kind of this spec, looks boldened. So I think I'm gonna go with bold on that, because it looks, even though it's not written down, it looks like it's part of the expectation. So Boulder, Colorado. It does look a little bit heavy. We'll see. Okay, cool. Let's look at peeling out the components that haven't been identified yet. So one of those is is this container. And what that's doing is, oh wait, is that one? Okay, so this is a good example. So we have these two containers. And this is where I kind of like feel a little bit of tension with all of this. My natural inclination is to, so there's a little bit of tension in the sense that I want to be able to give everyone the tools they need to have this process be fairly automatic in implementing. However, I know that this isn't going to be implemented all over the place, and that they could write a component that composes all of these and kind of on the app side and bake all of those expectations into it. Kind of on the other side is that I don't want to have like a lot of magic. I don't want to control a lot of layout stuff that that is conditional. Like for example, this gap right here. I'm not exactly sure how to solve that at the moment. My personal preference on all of this is to just kind of be like, you figure it out. But I feel like I might need to provide at least like a couple defaults so that in the examples you can kind of opt in or out based on how much you want to change. So maybe let's start with another one. Let's do this page title. So I'm going to start with the component that I want. Page title is not defined. Perfect. I'm going to go up to the top, import it. Should be an invariant violation, which it is because I haven't exported it from anywhere. Oops. Why can't I see what I'm doing? I somehow started recording. I have to pull it in from somewhere else now. Export page title. All right, cool. So we have page title now. And now that I have that component, I can I'm free to change that implementation across all of the places that I have page title. Okay, cool. So page title is the same now. Perfect. Now, I'm a little bit torn on whether or not I should be kind of deciding on the markup for this. I'm not necessarily one of those people that thinks that semantics are super important in an application, but I want to give people control over that should they decide that it's important to them. So I think what I'm going to do is, since I'm controlling the size of this anyway, I'm going to go with span, which means that I am going to have to explicitly do a couple things. So I'll need to change the font weight back to 700. But because I'm controlling this font size anyway, it's not that big of a deal. let's see. Okay, that looks right. Obviously, we don't want it to just say page titles, so that was oversight on my part. Let's do that game where we spread out all of the props. Cool. Now that page title text is actually coming from the components that are using it. Great. Now, I'd like to make this component flexible enough so that people can change it to be whatever markup they want. So a pattern that I generally like is the as component. So this could be any type of component that you want to give me. It could be like a div if you give me text, or it could be any component, some component that you define. This also gives you a mechanism for being able to define like some additional component interface and kind of be able to. So like if we had, I don't know, we could define some type of component and then have maybe that has like just like a padding prop or something like that, or maybe some default accessibility props, whatever. We could opt into that by using some component. So let me just change this example to be what it was before, which is to use H1. Now, none of this is working. I mean, even though this is displaying that prop, this as prop is just getting ignored. So I'm going to need to destructure that off. Okay. Now I want to use that here. Now I can't use as lowercase because there's a JSX heuristic that assumes that if it's lowercase, it's an actual DOM element. So it's gonna just kind of spit out as if it was like a div or span or any of those kind of things. Now what I need it like is capitalized, and then JSX will kind of understand. JSX will know that this is a component. So in order to do that, I use this kind of like fancy little bit of JavaScript, which is to say, hey, I'm going to destructure this property off, but I want it to be locally assigned to this value or to this variable as with a capital A. And just that little bit of magic should make it work for us. The error that we're getting is that we don't have a default. So I have, if you remember, I'm using page title in two places, one of which I provided the H1 value, the other I didn't provide anything. So this is undefined. So basically we're doing this or equivalent. So I need to provide a default value. There's a couple of ways to do default values in functional components. The easiest one is to just do this equals, which will provide like a default parameter in this destructuring, which is, so I had a span there. Cool, perfect. Now, if I did everything right, we should see that this first one, where we're using page title, is an H1, which is the one that I explicitly stated as equals H1. And down here, it should be a span, which is our default, which it is, which is great. Okay, cool. So we have this page title component now, which is great. I'm actually gonna use the H1 here as well. I think semantically this would make sense, since this is going to be the topmost title or whatever on the page. But I don't want to assume too much because it could not be. It could be anything. Let's see. I think this also demos well. So if I were to write up examples, I think that this would be pretty clear for the most part. Ooh. Now, one thing that I haven't done yet is, as with all the other components, when I define style, I want to be able to allow those values to be overwritten. For example, color red. Obviously, we see that that doesn't change anything because this is not extendable. So all we have to do is take style off, spread that off at the end, so values get so we can write over previously stated values. And we're still not getting it. Why so? Page title. Oh, got to use the right name. Excellent. Now, just to prove that you can write over other values, we'll say the font size is 60 pixels. Cool. So that allows people to do some one-off things that they need to. Okay, cool. So we added the page title component. That's great. I feel like this component is going to be a nice to have. I can't remember what they're called. I feel like OS 10 actually has a name for this. It's like a flexible spacer or something. Instead of wasting time on the name. Okay, so we'll import it as if it already existed. Go here. Oops. Okay, so we have that now. Export function flexible space. Cool. Now we can go anywhere that has that margin 0 auto. Kids just got back. If you're hearing all that noise in the background. Hey, Roo. Can you keep the door closed, please? All right, flexible spacer. Okay, cool. So flexible space. Okay, cool. So that seems fine. We were able to pull that component out. Where else do we have styles? So we're seeing it in these kind of containers that are inside here. Okay, so I really need to think about what the relationship of these containers is. I'm going to do so by giving these the best name that I can think of right now, which is just to explicitly name them and then kind of see what fleshes out from there. So this is like a display flex, and it's got margin top and bottom of 24 pixels. So I'll call this flex. Can I do this for pixels y? Such a terrible name, but I hope you can kind of see what I'm intending to do at the moment. So function flex 24 pixels y. Oh shoot, lost my screen for a second. Spread props so we can get children. iProps, brought to you by Apple. Cool. Okay, cool. So we have that, and so that's kind of giving us our 24 pixels around this. Fine enough. We also have this one that's align top and margin top of 16 pixels. Now, as I was scrolling down, I noticed that there's like a different one right here, which is only slightly different, but it has the align center, and that comes into play here. Again, I'm going to treat that as a totally unique case, and I don't know, see what happens as we extract those. So this is going to be function flex center. Let's see, what's this other one called? 24 pixels y. 24. Take props, because I know I'm going to spread those out. Okay, jump back to the bottom here. Sorry, a lot of jumping around today. It's going to be flex center 24 pixels y. Okay, cool. That all still works. We're kind of starting to see this shape form a little bit of what is kind of what's going on. Okay, so I have this flex center. I've introduced these two new components: flex center 24 pixels y and flex 24 pixels y. So this is just kind of a regular alignment, whatever that's supposed to be. Now, both of these are in service to this page title. Those are the only places that we're using those. So the question is, what changes if I do this flex center? I don't think anything should change, because in the event that this is presented without these buttons, it really doesn't matter if everything is aligned center or not, because there's no other content, at least not defined by the spec at this moment. So I could get rid of this one and just use the flex center in both cases. No harm, no foul. So I'm going to delete this so I don't get confused. Cool. So now we only have one component that does that page title wrapping. So these are always going to be paired together. I'm wondering if I should just wrap all of that into the into this page title, or if that's too much, like too much magic. If I should leave them separate. Again, I could always I could combine them together, keep them separate, but then expose them as like kind of keep the one component private and then do another thing. For right now, I'm going to just kind of I'm just going to go explicit. I'm going to expect you to implement every single part of this. So what I'll do is I'll call this page title container, just kind of loosely associate them by name. Go back up to the top. Import that as if it existed. Flux center. Peel this out. Oops. And export. Hey, Rube, I'll be out in 15 minutes, okay?
I just need some paper. Daddy, I need some paper.
Here you go, kiddo. All right, so we're going to change this everywhere that we have it. Now, this is interesting, is I've wrapped this whole thing. Oh, yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. So page title container. Perfect. We're exporting that. Now, I do start to feel like this page title container makes a little bit less sense when we have all of this in place. It feels a little overly specific. So it might be the case that I need to name these in terms of their relationship. Again, we'll deal with that later. I generally don't mind container right now. I feel like it's been an hour, so I won't tackle that quite yet. I do see this one popping out at me. So this is the one. The big difference here is that we have this align items top, which gets us this nice alignment here between the tabs and the buttons pushed to the side. So I might call this kind of in line with the page title container, the tabs container. And we are starting to see like a little bit of a relationship form between the content that's held here and that above. So let's call it tabs container. I'm going to import that. Let's find that code again. It's going to bark at us until it's right. Again, forgot to copy and paste. Man, oh man. All right, return, spread those props. Close that up. Works. Uh-oh, I froze up here. This might be a forced end to what we were doing. Okay, let's stop. Let's refresh, see what happens. Oh. Okay, so now we can get rid of this. Having some trouble here, unfortunately. All right, well, maybe that's as good a time as any to close. So let me just recap what we did today. So the big thing that we did was we started moving everything out into its own module. Now, the benefit there is that as we start to create these examples, now we can start to see the shape that the code would take in the event that it's, or from the author's perspective. So I'm going to be creating all of these. Oh, now my code went away. Bummer. So for me, I didn't really want to abstract anything that I wasn't already duplicating. Now, when I started to piece those examples together and kind of abstract that, now that gave me a little bit more clarity about what had already been pulled out and what hadn't been pulled out yet. So I was able to pull more components into the kind of that module as I realized they were necessary. Another thing allowed me to do was to see those places where I hadn't pulled components out. So we saw with that Flex container that those were almost identical, and that by just kind of applying that one extra prop to the other, we could totally eliminate the other and still serve that same purpose. So instead of having to take an additional prop that controls that center value, I was able to just kind of like take styles, and you can do that if you want to, but in terms of the default behavior, it's going to start with center, which works most of the time, and you can configure it where you need. Let's see, other than that, I think my editor's starting to load up again. We talked a little bit about modules. And while I'm at it, I might show you something else. If this hangs on for enough. Okay, looks like it's not going to refresh that example. Could be a syntax error. I don't know. I'll find out after we're live. Can't do anything. Anyway, with the way that this is modularized, you can have private components in there that you don't expose, so that wouldn't be able to be imported, but kind of help to kind of allow you to kind of make the abstractions that you want to make, but still isolating on those component boundaries. And then there are a handful of ways that we didn't cover today that you can import these depending on your particular, your favorite authoring style. So right now we're kind of pulling out all the named exports, but we could import these as just like a one big name and use that dot chaining syntax if we wanted to. So we could do like, instead of container, we could do tabbed header container, or tabbed header dot container everywhere we use it. Again, that's a really nice thing about modules exporting this way, that you can kind of allow the implementing developer to develop in a way that feels right to them. So that's it. Rings TV, hello. I'm sorry, we're just about to end because I'm at about an hour, and then this thing is cramping my style. I'm not able to click or code or do anything, but I thank you for joining. I'm probably going to do it again tomorrow if you want to join us then. So yeah, so thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you want to get notified when we do more of these, or follow me on Twitter. I try to post a link out when I do these. I'll probably do, it's Wednesday. I'll probably do one tomorrow and Friday again around this noon time. So if that doesn't work, just hit me up. Let me know. Thanks for watching. I hope you learned something today.